Welcome back. The Refugees, Part 2. It is a small inn, barely more than a cozy bed and breakfast. Aside from the basement apartment shared by the old man and his wife, and the attic room in the turret, not big enough to rent, but sufficient space for the help, namely me, there were 8 bedrooms with a shared bath to rent. Most of the time, there were only 2 or 3 of the rooms occupied on any given day. For the festival, we had a waiting list, just in case one of the bookings didn't show. All the hard work paid off, too. The old man was so happy as the guests poured in and the city began to overflow into our rooms. He almost promised me part of the weekend's profits. Some of the guests were very generous. The festival was the first community holiday celebration our town, the whole region really, had ever tried. The heart of giving was flowing freely through the pocketbooks of the travelers. Our clientele, normally middle-class business travelers like my father, suddenly transformed into upper middle and upper class revelers, people who had more money than sense and were just looking for the next big entertainment, which, at least this year, meant our brand new holiday shindig at which to throw their said money. The city began to swell, veritably bursting at the seams, and we were feeling the strain too. Not that I minded very much. For the first time in my short career in the service industry, customers were lining my palms with tokens of gratitude. Uncharacteristic of the holiday season, I made a point of hiding the gratuities from the old man in the fear that he might take them away and the hopes that I might build a small cache of my own. Something to just call my own. I didn't know at the time that the season of the celebration upon us, the annual party that was just beginning on this particular weekend, would work wonders in my life and in the life of the old man. Not long after the awaited weekend started, we found ourselves too busy to communicate. He was working the desk. I was running up and down tight staircases with luggage, with towels, with special requests from the kitchen, where his wife was banging and clanging in a gallant effort to keep up with the requests, while making elaborate preparations for the next morning's celebration breakfast. By midnight of the first day, when things began to settle in for the night, the old man finally was able to tell me that every bed in the place was filled, and at premium rates. He hinted that if the price was right, I might be required to spend my nights this weekend under one of the dining room tables instead of in my warm bed in the attic room. I thought he might demand it as a matter of principle to free up one more bed. But within a matter of minutes I was sitting on the edge of my bed, in the closet space I called home, looking out the rose window and considering all that had happened that day, anticipating the energy-filled weekend ahead. At that moment, I saw them on the edge of the property, looking around for what? A place to rest? A room for rent? A stoop to huddle under? I watched them for several minutes. He was young, only a few years older than I was at the time, and she was 2, maybe 3 years younger than her companion. That they were together was obvious. He was carefully guiding her around our back alley as they searched for a place of rest. It seemed that they had arrived for the festivities. Their clothes, while showing the kind of distress that traveled-in clothes get after several days' wear, were festive in color and nature. Even so, they carried no luggage, only a small backpack that might be adequate for a day trip or hike in the park, and even that bag appeared to be nearly empty. They paused in the halo of the street lamp, and I saw more clearly that they should be described as ragtag at best and vagrant at worst. She was, I could tell, reaching the moment of giving birth to a child. The euphemism was expecting. The reality was pregnant. And the truth of her situation can only be labeled as great with child. For indeed she was large. What I've since learned not to think and especially not to say around women in her condition. I opened the small round window to get a better view and possibly speak to the couple below, and heard the old man's voice advising them that we were filled to capacity and they should move on down the road, where perhaps another of the fine hotels in town would have space available. Thank you anyway. The young man's voice traveled up to my ears as he slowly turned to walk away. I saw a rectangle of light from a door closing on the ground below. One of the preparations our tiny city made for this spectacular weekend was to clear the streets of what was deemed the undesirable element, the homeless, the helpless, the beggars on a corner. So, seeing this pair drew a certain amount of concern from me, concern that they had somehow slipped through the cracks, concern that their presence here might somehow adversely affect our business. I needed to investigate. Quietly, so as not to disturb the guests, I made my way down the back stairs. There I saw the old man who told me to try and do something about those vagrants. I don't want 'em ruining our paying customers' holiday, he said. But don't call the police. That'd be worse than the appearance of these two. The desperate look on the young man's face spoke volumes to my conscience. And then I saw her, the little woman. She was little in most ways, but very big in another way. I could tell that she was tired from travel, anxious to sit down and rest, but most of all, in immediate danger of giving birth right there on our back stoop. I'm sorry, sir, I began in way of introduction, nodding slightly to the woman and hoping not to sound overly harsh. The city officials have said you can't stay out here overnight. And as the owner has, I'm sure, already told you, we are full to capacity for the duration of the festival. Thankfully, I caught myself before calling the boss the old man. Yes, replied the man, we understand the temporary law and the troubling situation. But you see, we just arrived in town a few minutes ago. Our vehicle broke down about 3 miles out, and we were trying to reach some friends who are here for the celebration. My wife is tired and needs to rest. He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial tone as he whispered, I don't think she'll last through the night before the baby gets here. I was about to shoo them on down the road when my eye landed on the shed. The only time I had been inside was the day before to retrieve a wrench the old man needed for the repairs on the range. But when I saw it, I remembered the ancient car that was there, obviously broken down and awaiting restoration, which the old man didn't have time or funds to do, and a stack of dusty, ratty old blankets that would help to stave off the cold. I thought that having the cold wind broken by the thin walls of the shed and a place to rest, at least for the night, would be better than turning them out in the cold. The old man wouldn't be happy. But I was at least following his orders, in spirit if not in word. Quietly, in here, I beckoned. The boss should not know about this, but it will get you off the streets, out of the cold, and give your wife a place to rest. Inside, I found 3 of the blankets that were in good enough shape to provide some comfort. I shook them out and arranged them inside the back of the car, which allowed for the couple to become more comfortable than sleeping on the concrete floor. My flashlight shone on their faces, and they looked not like vagrants as the old man had called them, but refugees, people who were forced to be where they would not have chosen, but falling victim to the circumstances around them. Their eyes, while tired and desperate, still were registering gratitude. While I helped the man prepare the space and to fill the air, I asked simple questions to pass the time. Are you here for the festival? I came in hopes of finding work among the revelers, he replied. I heard that many employers from all around the region will be here, and that some might be looking for skilled labor. I'm a mechanic by trade, but the market in our hometown is saturated. With a new one on the way, I felt like I needed to do something to find a better position. I nodded my understanding. I knew what it was to be able to find work of any kind. I was now apprenticed to a humble hotel owner, working slave labor, albeit with a prize in mind. When I was sure they were comfortable for the night, I turned to leave and saw the young mother-to-be smile her thanks at me with her eyes. I nodded, "Is nothing," and headed back to the kitchen door. She met me there, the old man's wife, with a paper bag heavy with food. "They must eat," she said. She nodded toward the shed. She must have noticed the concern registered on my face, because she quickly added, "He knows nothing. He's been asleep for half an hour while you made them a bed. I was watching at the door. You're right. They need a place, and if he finds out, he will see the truth of the situation too." I delivered the bag and noticed that the mother was sleeping soundly under the patient, watchful eye of her husband.